So here is part 2 of our exploration of the Farmstead buildings at the intersection of Stieg Road and Errick Road. Here we have what might have been the last surviving part of that complex that wasn't control burned in the late 90s, early 2000s. And this is a building that collapsed this way to the north. And the inside walls you can see going out, and with the old roof having come down on top of what was left of the interior, and some debris related to that collapse. And then we go over this way more, and we can see a concrete wall that continues along. In other words, this is a separate addition to this, or that that building was an addition to this one. They came out, and the concrete wall goes up to here and then goes along like that there, as has previously been photographed. So just to try to get over this. This is the tricky part. But here we have more of that wall. So this is another part of the complex there, going all the way up to about that property line next door. This is the lot right here that's being bulldozed out and being replaced with a housing development, or at least one or two houses in this area. If I try to get underneath this. Okay. We move on to this foundation here, which is also in at least two distinct sections. We have this section here, which is kind of flat to the ground, but probably had a wall, more of a stone or concrete wall mix that's now been wiped out, but it follows along up to here, and then straight over here to go to this section here, which has got a series of notches knocked into them. And this might be indicative of a series of floor beams. And in fact, when we look at this here, we see some wood impacted into this. So yes, these indeed held wooden beams. And some carbonization here. You can see the carbonized impression here. This is some burned wood up against this structure, these foundational remains, which of course tells us, just like in there, it tells us about the control burn that happened here over 20 years ago. So these would have been floorboards on top of those beams that would have gone across this area here, which is really just a crawl space that's been exposed to the elements now for over 20 years. And then we have this curious pile of broken stone and broken brick. This is stuff that might have been actually stacked inside of the structure that was here in the old building. And then we have a raised concrete pad on top of another set of walls. So this is probably an older part of the building, or contemporaneous to the first. And there's all sorts of remnants of carbonized wood here. Lots of carbonized remains here. Yep, so that speaks exactly to what I had witnessed here over 20 years ago from the road. Piece of metal from something, probably from the roof. And that's a stair foundation. Doorway pad. As far as I know, there were no basements over here. And here we have the foundational remains of the oldest building easily on this lot. it's got a number of interesting features even now. It would have been essentially wooden from about here up, and you can see the leftover bolts from when this was true. There's an opening there and a doorway out. The door would have been right here. The average thickness of the walls is 1.5 feet on average. And this would have been built here by the 1850s or so, I want to say, for this building here. Everybody else back there dates to a later time by a few decades or so. Not much in the way of artifacts today, but I will take one of these bolts that would have been in the rock. You can see how in the right angles to help them anchor right into the mortar. So this became loose when this wall was loosened up more, and that fell away. This is on my very block, this piece of history right here on my block, opposite from where I live, on Ward Road. And if we literally enter in through the old doorway, we can proceed to see a few items like these carbonized pieces of wood. They look carbonized anyways. This was, yes, very much carbonized, just a lot of moss growing over them. But this is one of the buildings that they control burned at this location. That's the surrounding walls. And here we have, right below it all, these bed frames, actually. There's an entire bed frame, in fact, at least one. You could see the side poles right there. You can even see the springs yet. It's like filming a sort of shipwreck, isn't it? You see the remains of the day, the remains of lives lived here. And this may have even started out as a small home and then expanded out. But this bed was here for a reason, probably to store it away. But it could have been lived in at some point. The bed frames are certainly old enough. The headboard and the footboard, I should say, and the underlying structure. So there's this building in relation to the other two over there, and another building over in there more. That includes that part of it in that direction, right in here with the collapsed walls and roof. A part that might not have actually been control burned that day, possibly out of fears of setting next door on fire or something like that, which is possible. So it looks like they just burned down 3 of the 4 known buildings that were here. This being number 1, 2, 3, and 4. At least that part of this pair hasn't been there in a long, long time, so they could have at least torn it down at that stage. But yeah, look at right here, by the way, as we continue to explore. There's a piece of wood that's left in there between the stones. have to nail into something, and so these pieces of wood were put into this so that a doorway could be manufactured and installed here. We see a part of the concrete form that would have contained the doorway assembly for it to then fill in this space here. You've got this metal pipe that goes through too. Yeah, when they control burn these, I don't think they really cleaned them out, so you get what you get left over. What survived the control burn. It includes that bucket and this bucket right here. It's a curious one. It might have even had a lid on it. So because it had stuff in there that carbonized. And so that concludes the tour of the Errick Road and Stieg Road intersection farm buildings. Whatever may come here, let this little complex of buildings that served to feed a family and served to feed a community ever be forgotten. Let it not be forgotten, indeed. This is Justin Higner, Town of Wheatfield Town Historian, October 25th, 2024. One last overview. Because it's special. It's a special place to me. I live on the other side of the block and used to come over here to poke around. Luckily, I've been able to see now these remains up close one last time and exposed like this. That's a pile of stone over here, gathered up from what's probably the barn next to me here, or from another structure entirely over here. Anything using stones that big possibly constitutes a larger building. Oh, and of course, I forgot. We have on this moonscape this machinery constituted some form of farm vehicle. You can see the axle and the spokes reaching out, and the gear housing, and a sort of belt shaft. If any of y'all can figure out what this was, I mean, it looks like a reaper, an assembly for some kind of reaping system that was left here. Look at that piece there, in fact. And caught up in this mess way in there is more of the reaping system. You can see the spokes and the combs, the comb-like fingers coming out from that whole mess. They shoved everything over here, so it's hard to really tell completely, but I'm sure looking at this long enough, I'm sure you guys out there can figure out what this is. But this is old farm equipment, of course, going back well over a century in age at this point. So and this is me looking to the west. And that direction is the east. That's Stieg Road heading to the east, an Errick Road school, and a historic homestead on the left. So you can see some of the wheel right there. So Thank you all for watching. God bless.